She was born into luxury, but not into freedom. At just 3 years old, Ela Vale, the only daughter of a powerful biotech CEO, could barely walk. Her legs trembled, her voice was quiet, and her memories carefully edited, not by time, but by the hands of those who claimed to love her. Her father, Bradford Valerin, a multi-billion-dollar medical empire. To the world, he was a visionary, a savior. To Isla, he was a mystery, and maybe a monster. Then came Ezra, a soft-spoken boy no one noticed, a so-called beggar hacker with nothing to offer except the truth. And one day, on a flight neither of them was meant to board, he whispered 7 impossible words. "Sir, I can help her stand again." What followed was a war, between truth and lies, between science and control, between the daughter who was broken and the father who broke her. But the real question is, what price do we pay to be seen? And when the masks fall, will love survive the truth? This is not just a story about walking again, it's about rising, from silence, from shame, from a past you didn't choose to a future you finally claim. So, if you believe in stories that challenge power, restore dignity, and remind us of what truly matters, like, share, and subscribe to follow this unforgettable 12-part journey. Let's begin. The airport smelled of cold metal and reheated coffee. Tired travelers shuffled through long security lines, dragging wheeled suitcases and children behind them. No one noticed the boy in the hand-me-down sweatshirt, sitting alone on a bench near Gate 19. His name was Ezra Quinn, and everything he owned fit inside a navy blue backpack resting on his knees. The straps were frayed, the zipper stuck. But inside was his most prized possession, a small, dog-eared notebook filled with handwritten medical theories, diagrams, and formulas he had copied from discarded textbooks at the shelter library. He glanced at the departure board. Flight TS-228 to San Francisco on time. His grandmother, Ms. Odell, was dozing lightly beside him, wrapped in an old army blanket that smelled of lavender and rain. Her breath came shallow but steady. Ezra didn't want to wake her. Not yet. She had sold her wedding ring to afford this flight. The only reason they were flying to California was the hope of getting help from a free clinic, maybe. Just maybe. Something could slow her failing kidneys. He turned his eyes to the window. A private jet landed on the tarmac. Sleek, polished, loud. From it emerged a man in a tailored charcoal suit, surrounded by assistants and a nervous-looking doctor. He carried himself with the kind of posture that told the world I own it. At his side, a girl no older than Ezra was being helped into a wheelchair. Her legs didn't move. Her hands gripped the armrest tight. Her name, as Ezra would learn hours later, was Ela Vale, and her father was Bradford Vale, a biotech billionaire who held patents on half the cancer drugs in the Western Hemisphere. Ezra blinked, not because he recognized the man, but because he saw something else, the girl's tremors, the subtle flicker in her eyelids, the way her right foot twisted just slightly inward. It wasn't nothing. It wasn't just paralysis. He'd read about this. He was sure of it. Degenerative cerebellar dysplasia with neurovascular crossover. He whispered to himself, eyes wide, his heart kicked up. It was rare, extremely rare, and fatal, if untreated correctly. He should have stayed quiet, should have minded his business, but that wasn't in Ezra's nature. They boarded the plane 20 minutes later. Rows of businessmen in pressed shirts, families with kids already arguing over who got the window seat. Ezra held his grandma's hand as they passed through first class, ignored by the attendants. They took seats in the very back. Row 29, middle and aisle. Across the plane, Bradford Vale sat in 1A, typing furiously into a sleek laptop. Isla was beside him, her head lolling slightly to the left, breathing softly. A nurse clutched her medical file like it was made of gold. Ezra couldn't look away. Every now and then, he'd glance over the rows. Something about that girl didn't sit right. Something was wrong. Worse, something was getting worse. An hour into the flight, the lights dimmed. The seatbelt sign flickered off. Flight attendants handed out warm peanuts and plastic cups of juice. Then a sharp clatter from first class, gasps, a voice yelling. Isla Ezra jumped in his seat. Passengers turned to see the girl in the wheelchair convulsing violently. Her head snapped back, her arms stiffened. The nurse dropped her tablet in panic. Bradford's voice roared over the quiet hum of the plane. "Get the doctor now." A woman in scrubs hurried forward. The flight crew scrambled. A curtain was drawn across the aisle, hiding the scene, but not the sound. Ezra felt it in his chest, the rush of adrenaline, the certainty. He knew what to do. He stood, just barely, took a deep breath, and walked forward. A flight attendant stepped in front of him. "Sir, please sit down. We're handling a medical situation." Ezra looked her straight in the eyes. "I can help her," he said. She blinked. "What I said." He drew a shaky breath. "I know what she has. I've studied it. I can help." The attendant's eyes narrowed. "You're, what, 11-12?" Ezra said, even though that was still 4 months away. "She has cerebellar dysplasia with vascular crossover. The spasms mean the condition is progressing. They're treating her wrong. She's in danger. Sit down, kid. No, please." His voice cracked. "If they give her another dose of sedative or dopamine agonists, she'll stop breathing. Her cerebellum can't take the overload. She needs a neuromuscular bypass stimulator, or at least access to, I said, sit down." The attendant raised her hand to push him back, and from behind the curtain, Bradford Vale's voice thundered. "Who the hell is that?" The curtain whipped open. The billionaire's eyes locked on Ezra, a boy in ragged jeans, shoes too big for his feet, a notebook peeking from his hoodie pocket. Ezra swallowed hard. Then he said it. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." Silence fell across the cabin. Bradford Vale, CEO of Vale Thera, stared at the boy standing in front of him like he was looking at a ghost. A flight attendant reached for Ezra's shoulder. "I said, return to your seat." But Bradford raised a hand. "Wait." The billionaire's voice was calm, but clipped, authoritative, cold. "Did you just say you could make my daughter walk again?" Ezra's heart pounded. His palms were sweaty, but he stood his ground. "Yes, sir." Bradford's jaw tightened. "You think you're smarter than the neurologists I've flown in from Zurich, Stanford, and Tokyo." Ezra looked down for a second, then raised his eyes. "I don't think I'm smarter, sir. I think I see what they missed." A low chuckle came from behind Bradford. "The nurse. Where are your credentials?" "Young man, Harvard Johns Hopkins." Ezra hesitated, then spoke simply. "Row 29B." Bradford narrowed his eyes. "What's your name, Ezra Quinn? You some kind of child prodigy?" "No," Ezra said. "Just someone who reads a lot and cares more." That answer hung in the air. A beat. Then Bradford stood. He was tall, commanding. His presence made even the flight attendant step back. He walked toward Ezra slowly, looking him over like a sculptor inspecting a cracked statue. Shoes too worn, hoodie threadbare, hands trembling, but eyes steady. A paradox. Bradford pointed toward Ezra's seat. "Get your things. What? Bring your notebook. Come." Ezra blinked. Why the man's eyes flashed. Because if you're right, my daughter doesn't have time for my ego to get in the way. Moments later, Ezra sat in first class. For the first time in his life, the air smelled like leather and imported perfume instead of recycled peanuts. A doctor hovered nearby, a tablet lit up with Isla's vitals. The girl lay limp in her wheelchair, face pale, her eyes fluttering between sleep and seizure. Ezra flipped open his notebook, pages filled with drawings, notations, margin notes in multiple colors. He pointed at a crude diagram of the brainstem. Her symptoms follow the same pattern I read about in a paper by Dr. Rena Solis. But there's a variance. Her tremors rotate counterclockwise, not linear. That means the cerebellar pressure is creating a reverse neural feedback loop. The doctor scoffed. "That's just a theory." Ezra pointed again. "It's real. And if I'm right, Isla's medication is magnifying the problem, not treating it." The doctor moved to respond, but Bradford held up a hand. Again. He turned to his daughter. "Isla," he whispered, kneeling beside her. Her eyelids fluttered. "Daddy?" She breathed. "My chest hurts." Panic flickered in Bradford's face. Ezra saw it, the mask cracking. He handed Bradford a page. This is what you need. Saline flush, no dopamine. Elevate her neck slightly, not fully. If her chest tightens again, stimulate her median nerve for 10 seconds, not 30. The nurse frowned. That's not. Bradford didn't wait. He gave the order. They followed Ezra's instructions. Seconds ticked. Isla twitched once. Then her breath evened out. The monitor beeped slower. Her face relaxed. A whisper of color returned to her cheeks. Bradford turned, eyes wide, shaken, silent. In the back of the plane, Ms. Odell clutched the armrest tightly, heart racing. She'd seen Ezra rise from his seat, march forward. She had prayed it wouldn't get him in trouble again. Too many times before, his gifts had been misunderstood, mocked, punished. "Ezra," she whispered, "please come back, baby." But he didn't, because now people were watching him with a new kind of expression. Not pity, not suspicion, respect. The seatbelt sign blinked back on. Turbulence ahead, but something had shifted that couldn't be undone. Ezra sat across from Isla, notebook in his lap. She opened her eyes slightly. "You're not a doctor," she whispered. He smiled. "Not yet." She gave him a faint grin. "You talk funny. I read a lot." She reached out and touched the edge of his notebook. "Do you always carry this?" Ezra nodded. "It's my map for what I want to fix in the world." Her hand fell back into her lap, eyes closing again. "Then don't ever lose it." Bradford leaned back. For once in his life, he had no idea what to say. He had built empires, fired boardrooms, destroyed competitors. He had outnegotiated senators and stolen market share from Europe to Dubai. But now, a 12-year-old boy from the back row had done what his $5 million diagnostic team couldn't. Saved his daughter. At least, for now. He turned to Ezra. "What do you want?" Ezra looked down, then up. "I want my grandma to live. She's in stage 4 kidney failure. I want her to get treatment without being turned away because we don't have insurance." Bradford nodded slowly, and after that, Ezra held his breath, then whispered, "I want to go to medical school, so no one like Isla ever has to wait for someone like me to speak up." The billionaire's face shifted, softened, but somewhere in the shadows of first class. Not everyone was smiling. A man in a crisp gray blazer, seated 3 rows up, picked up his phone, typed a quick message, urgent. The boy's theories match early-stage prototype notes from Project Helix. Possible IP breach, investigate, because Ezra Quinn had just saved a life and unknowingly stepped into something far more dangerous. The plane cut through a layer of high-altitude clouds, leaving behind the golden sunset that bathed the sky in a soft orange hue. Inside, though, the air had changed. Tension hummed under the murmur of conversations and the rattle of snack carts. People were still whispering about the boy from row 29B. Some called it luck, others called it a miracle. But those who looked closer saw something deeper clarity in chaos, the kind you only earn from suffering. Ezra sat quietly now, back in his seat beside Miss Odell. She was awake and watching him with eyes that glistened. "You did it, baby," she whispered. "You helped that girl." Ezra shrugged, eyes still wide. For now, Ms. Odell squeezed his hand. Her own felt papery and cold. "You've always seen the world different, Ezra. Always knew things before you had a name for them, but I never thought you'd be using all that light on an airplane." He leaned his head on her shoulder. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." She chuckled softly. "Oh, sweet boy, trouble usually finds those who tell the truth." Meanwhile, in first class, Bradford Vale leaned over a phone, his jaw clenched. He was texting someone labeled only Dr. Elias M. "Confidential. Send me the Helix data again. I want to compare it to the boy's notes." A message blinked back almost instantly. "Already did. The overlap is unsettling." Bradford exhaled through his nose. Ezra's page-for-page breakdown of Isla's rare condition had matched the unpublished core of Helix Vale Thera's most secretive AI-powered neuromedical research initiative. It was still an early simulation phase. And yet, a boy who lived in shelters and read second-hand books had outpaced them. Bradford glanced toward row 29B. Who was this kid? And, more importantly, who else knew about him? 3 rows behind. The man in the gray blazer, Richard Trent, director of corporate security, was already typing up a classified internal report. Subject, Ezra Quinn. Age 12, guardian, Odell Quinn. 68, travel origin Newark destination, SF clinic referral. Community free program incident. Medical intervention on Vale's daughter, mid-flight, result stabilized, confirmed neurological insight risk level, high intellectual property, uncontrolled variable. He hit send and stared straight ahead. If this boy's knowledge got out, it wouldn't just make headlines, it would destroy careers, collapse NDAs, expose how much corporate research was built on hiding failures, not solving them. This wasn't just about one girl anymore, it was about power. An hour later, Isla stirred again. Ezra had returned to check on her. Bradford allowed it not because he trusted the boy, but because Isla insisted. Her voice was quiet, but determined. "Can you tell me what you think I'll feel like if I ever walk again?" Ezra looked at her, puzzled. "I think it'll feel like remembering a song you used to love, but forgot existed." She smiled. Tears pooled in the corners of her eyes. "You sound more like a poet than a doctor." Ezra shrugged. "I like both." There was silence, comfortable this time. Then she asked, "Why do you want to help people?" Ezra didn't answer right away. He looked past her, toward the clouds outside the window, then whispered, "Because nobody helped my mom." Flashback. A flickering memory. Ezra, age 7, clutching a teddy bear in a cold hospital hallway, his mother wheezing through a breathing mask, doctors ignoring the chart, a nurse saying she should have come sooner. She hadn't, because she didn't have insurance, because she was afraid, because she had been taught that health care was a luxury, not a right. Ezra never saw her again after that night. Back in the present, Isla touched his wrist gently. "I'm sorry." Ezra nodded. "That's why I read so much. I figured, if no one else would learn for her, then I would." In the front row, Bradford watched the two children talk. A boy who lived in poverty, a girl born into privilege. But hair mid-air, between cities and fates, they were just two human beings trying to survive pain. Bradford wasn't used to that. His world was built on walls, boardrooms, security badges, controlled access, but Ezra Quinn, he was a key no one had planned for, a living crack in the system, and cracks let in light. But Richard Trent had other plans. He stood up, walked to Bradford's seat, bowed slightly. "Sir." Private word. Bradford followed him to the galley, lowered his voice. "What is it?" Richard opened his tablet, showed him a screen. There, under a flashing alert icon, rival firm Genevance already flagged Ezra Quinn's name through a back-channel algorithm. There's chatter, interest, potential recruitment. Bradford blinked, jaw clenched. They're trying to poach him. Not officially, but they're watching. Bradford looked back toward Ezra, now laughing softly with Isla. That boy had gone from a seat in the shadows to a high-stakes asset in a corporate war, all within one flight, and he didn't even know it. Back in row 29, Miss Odell's breathing grew heavier. Ezra returned just in time to see her tremble. He dropped beside her. "Grandma," she gave him a weak smile. "I'm fine, baby." He opened her pill bottle, only to find empty. His face crumpled. "Why didn't you tell me you were out?" "I didn't want you to worry," she whispered. "You were doing something important." Ezra's hand shook. "I can't lose you, too." She reached up, brushed a tear from his cheek. "You won't. You hear me. You keep being who you are. Ezra Quinn. You keep showing them." She coughed. Hard. Ezra flagged a flight attendant. "I need help, please." And that's when, for the first time, Bradford Vail himself stepped forward. "I'll get her what she needs." The hum of the aircraft felt louder than usual, not because of the engines, but because of the silence between Ezra and Bradford. They stood face to face now, a billionaire whose empire was built on controlling lives, and a boy who had just saved one. "Ms." Odell's cough echoed down the aisle. Bradford knelt beside her, already tapping into his satellite phone. "I'm getting you help," he said quietly. Ezra stared at him, confused. This man didn't owe them anything, not a cent, but, for the first time, Bradford Vail looked human, less polished, less invincible, and more aware that no amount of money could buy what he had just witnessed: uncompromising love, fierce loyalty, and genius, wrapped in second-hand clothes. Within minutes, flight attendants had cleared space near the galley. A medical kit was opened. Bradford's onboard physician was summoned. She took one look at Ms. Odell's vitals and paled. This woman needs dialysis and stabilizers, now. Ezra's voice cracked. We don't have insurance. We were going to a free clinic. I didn't know she'd get this bad on the flight. Bradford turned to the doctor. Prep what you can, and when we land, she goes straight to Baycross Medical, under my name, private care, full suite. Ezra's eyes widened. No, we can't pay for that. You're not paying, Bradford said. His voice was quieter now, measured. You gave me something I can't repay. Let me try anyway. Ezra blinked, looked to Ms. Odell. She managed a weak smile, but her eyes glistened, tired, relieved, grateful. Meanwhile, further up the aisle, Richard Trent was not pleased. He watched the scene unfold through narrowed eyes, fingers tapping against his tablet. To him, every second of this drama was a PR liability. Bradford wasn't thinking like a CEO. He was acting like a father, a man, and emotion-clouded logic. Ezra Quinn was becoming too public, too unpredictable. Richard drafted a message to the firm's legal counsel. Begin quiet investigation into Quinn background, financial, academic, social, prepare containment options. He paused, then added, and reach out to Genevance Mole. I want to know what they've offered him and if they plan to move before we land. Back in row 29B. Ezra sat with his notebook open. He wasn't scribbling theories now. He was writing down memories. Ms. Odell's favorite songs. The smell of her Sunday gumbo. How she used to hum while folding clothes. He didn't know if she'd be okay. He hoped, but hope felt fragile at 30,000 feet. Suddenly, Isla appeared beside him. She wheeled herself down from first class against protocol, but no one stopped her. Ezra looked up, startled. Hey, she said softly. Shouldn't you be resting? She smiled. I've done enough of that. She leaned in, glancing at his notes. You're writing about her? Ezra nodded. I don't want to forget. She hesitated. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you think people like us, broken in some way, are allowed to fix others? Ezra looked at her, surprised. Then slowly closed his notebook. I think, sometimes, we're the only ones who can. Isla blinked. Her fingers fidgeted with the sleeve of her hoodie. You know, my dad has never listened to anyone the way he listened to you. Ezra gave a faint smile. I wasn't really trying to be heard. I just didn't want you to die. She looked down, then whispered, Maybe that's what made him hear you. Over the intercom, the captain's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent into San Francisco shortly. Medical personnel will be meeting us at the gate. Please remain seated. Ezra closed his eyes. It felt like the longest flight of his life. And yet somehow, not long enough, so much had changed. And outside the window, the lights of the city sparkled like constellations scattered across black velvet. Bradford stepped into the aisle. Ezra, when we land, I need you to come with me. Ezra stood cautiously. To the hospital, Bradford nodded. Yes, but also to a place called Valthera. I want you to see it. What we've been building, I think. We could use someone like you. Ezra froze. You mean work for you? Something like that? Learn with us? Lead? Maybe? In time? Ms. Odell gave a gentle nod from her seat. You go on, baby, she whispered. Ezra's eyes filled again. He had dreamed of this his whole life, not the offer, but the chance, the recognition, the door that never existed finally creaking open. He looked up at Bradford Vale and said, I'll go, but only if my grandma comes with me." Bradford smiled. "She's coming." "Of course she is." Outside the plane, a black SUV waited, medical staff, press vans, and even a drone hovered. Ezra stepped off the aircraft into a storm of flashbulbs and curiosity. But all he cared about was one thing, that Ms. Odell was safe and Isla was smiling. But across town, in a steel high-rise, a rival executive opened a classified email. Subject: Ezra Quinn status, inbound location, Vale Thera, HQ risk profile, critical response strategy activated. And just like that, the boy from row 29B had become the most valuable and dangerous mind in modern medicine. And his fight was just beginning. 3 hours after touchdown, Ezra stood inside a building most of the world didn't know existed. Vale Thera headquarters, tucked discreetly in the hills above Palo Alto, wasn't flashy. It didn't have a towering skyline presence or glowing logos. It didn't need to. What it held inside made nations whisper. And Ezra was about to walk through the front doors. He clutched his notebook tight as the glass doors slid open. The air inside smelled sterile, but beneath that, something more potent: expectation, power, pressure. Bradford led him down a long corridor, muted steel walls, no windows, everything coded, locked, surveilled. They passed rooms where men and women in white coats argued over screens that displayed neural maps, DNA spirals, and moving models of human organs, and deeper still, toward a wing marked only Project Orion. Ezra paused. "Where are we going?" Bradford didn't look back. "To meet the team you just disrupted." The door slid open into a cold lab with brilliant lighting. Inside stood 5 scientists, none of them smiling. At the center, Dr. Eliana Voss, Vale Thera's head of neuroengineering, mid-40s, hair tied back like a scalpel, eyes sharp enough to cut through silence. She turned, assessing Ezra like a misbehaving intern. "This is the boy." Bradford nodded. "Ezra Quinn." Voss's lips pursed. "You tampered with one of our highest-profile patients mid-flight," she said. "Without clearance, without a license, without protocol." Ezra straightened his back. "I saved her." Voss tilted her head. "Maybe. Or maybe you just got lucky." He stepped forward. "No, I noticed what your system missed. Because I wasn't trying to prove anything, I was trying to see her." Voss paused, then, surprisingly, said, "Good." Ezra blinked. "Excuse me, I don't need obedience. I need innovation. But if you're going to stay here," she pointed to a screen, "you better learn fast. Because this," she tapped a hologram of a patient's brain, "is what we're about to give the world." They spent the next 2 hours in silence, watching, learning. Ezra took notes so fast his fingers cramped. He asked questions no one under 30 had ever asked. And with each page, Voss's eyes narrowed not with disdain, but with interest. Still, something gnawed at Ezra, a feeling, a fracture in the foundation. That night, Bradford brought him into his private office. The lights were low, outside, the hills were quiet. Bradford poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to Ezra like they were equals. "You did well today," he said. Ezra hesitated. "There's something I need to ask, of course." Ezra leaned in. Project Orion isn't just about saving people. Is it? Bradford's eyes didn't flicker. He took a long sip, then set the glass down. "No, a beat." Ezra's breath caught in his chest. "I thought this was about medicine." "It is. But medicine is power. Ezra, the kind that moves governments, reshapes economies, the kind that can save billions or silence millions. Ezra looked away. What if I don't want that kind of power? Bradford didn't flinch. Then you better figure out who will use it once you're gone. That night, Ezra sat in his temporary suite. Ms. Odell was in a hospital nearby, stabilized, resting. He should have felt relief, but all he felt was weight, responsibility, and a question that wouldn't leave him alone: was he becoming part of the cure or part of the disease? The next morning, he found a note slipped under his door. No name, just 7 words, typed on a plain card. "You're not safe here. Meet me tonight." His fingers tightened. The hallway suddenly felt colder. It was almost midnight when Ezra slipped through the silent corridor. The Valethera compound never truly slept, but it had hours when the lights dimmed and the halls felt haunted. This was one of them. He clutched the anonymous note in his palm, heart racing. "You're not safe here. Meet me tonight." The message had given coordinates: Level B3, Section Theta, Surveillance Wing. He had passed by it earlier that day, a part of the building no one talked about, not even in whispers. Now he stood before the sealed door. No guards, no cameras, just a retina scanner glowing blue. Ezra took a breath, then pulled something from his pocket, a thin wire wrapped around an old silver key, his grandma's necklace, one she'd given him long ago, back when she worked night shifts cleaning government buildings. It had a chipped RFID tag embedded in the base. He'd once hacked it as a kid to prank the school vending machine. He prayed it would still work. He held it to the scanner. Click. The door unlatched. He slipped inside. The room smelled of dust, metal, and stale secrets. Rows of screens stretched across the far wall. Footage streamed from every hallway, lab, elevator, and restricted zone in Valethera. Ezra approached, eyes scanning the feeds. Then he froze. One screen showed a close-up of Ms. Odell's hospital room, another Bradford's private quarters, a third his own suite, from an angle he didn't recognize. They were watching everything, and not just him. In the bottom corner, a feed showed another face: Isla, in her room, in her chair, talking to herself, drawing, and on the screen beside it, a neuromonitoring overlay. They weren't just observing her. They were recording her brain patterns in real time. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "You weren't supposed to see that." Ezra spun around. A woman stepped out from the shadows. Dark trench coat, bare face, sharp eyes, maybe mid-30s. "Who are you?" he asked. "Name's Raina. I used to work here. Now I just try to undo the damage." Ezra studied her. "You sent the note." She nodded. "I knew you'd come. You're the first person I've seen shake Bradford's control in years." Ezra looked back at the screen showing Isla. "She's not just his daughter. Is she?" Raina sighed. She was the first prototype. The beginning of Project Orion wasn't about treatment. It was about enhancement, engineering better humans. Bradford used his own daughter as the test subject. Ezra's stomach turned. He experimented on her, more like redesigned her. They call it neural optimization. But the truth is uglier. Ezra gritted his teeth. "She doesn't know. Does she?" Raina shook her head. "And if she finds out the wrong way, it could break her. Or worse." Ezra looked again at the feed. Isla, alone, smiling faintly, as if she still believed this place might heal her. "I need your help," Raina said. "You saw what you're up against, and you're smart, smarter than anyone they've hired." Ezra stayed silent. Inside, a storm raged. He wanted to believe Veilthera was flawed but redeemable, that maybe he could fix it from the inside. But what if the foundation itself was cracked? "You want me to spy for you?" he asked. Raina stepped closer. "I want you to choose truth over comfort." Ezra returned to his room at 217 Mum. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Bradford's offer echoed in his mind. Eliana Voss's cold approval, Isla's searching eyes. He thought of his grandma, her breathing steadier now, thanks to the treatment. What would she say? Would she tell him to stay silent, play the long game, or would she whisper the same thing she used to tell him as a child baby? If something feels wrong, it probably is. Before dawn, Ezra rose. He tore a page from his notebook and wrote only 3 words. "I believe you." He slid it under Isla's door, and then he disappeared into the archive room. He had research to do, a digital trail to follow, and somewhere buried in years of encrypted logs and surveillance metadata was the truth. About Bradford, about Project Orion, and about what Ezra was willing to become. The archive room wasn't on any official map. Tucked beneath the East Wing sub-basement, it was meant for off-site redundancy storage, a place only a handful of people knew even existed. But Raina had slipped Ezra the old credentials, a cipher code and a 6-digit timestamp. Ezra had cracked it in under an hour. Now he stood before rows of silent servers. The hum was low, steady like the heartbeat of a beast just beginning to stir. He moved carefully, fingers skimming the faded labels: Orion, Trials, Phase 0, Orion, Isla, Neural Resync, Orion, Subject B17 EMQ. He paused. EMQ, Ezra Michael Quinn. He didn't remember signing up for any trial. He'd never been inside this facility before last week. And yet, there it was, a file, logged and time-stamped 2 years ago. He clicked. The footage played on a tiny, time-worn screen. A boy, maybe 7, sat at a public school desk. Same curly hair, same sharp eyes. A woman's voice narrated from behind the lens. Subject B17 demonstrates hyper-accelerated pattern recognition when exposed to cross-modal stimuli. Despite lacking access to formal labs, he constructed a simulated cardiac defibrillator using recycled copper wire and... Ezra hit pause. His breath caught in his throat. They'd been watching him since before he ever knew Veilthera existed. He scrolled further. Clips of him at science fairs, in the hospital lobby, waiting for his grandma, even a shot of him fixing a malfunctioning wheelchair in a clinic hallway. The camera had always been watching. His stomach turned cold. "Why me?" he whispered. But he knew the answer. He wasn't an accident. He was the backup plan. The prodigy in the shadows nurtured from a distance, shaped into someone Veilthera could one day use or control. Back in his room, Ezra sat motionless for hours. The sun had risen. The compound was stirring. But inside him, nothing moved. The boy, who once believed in healing, now sat at the edge of rage. A soft knock. He opened the door and froze. It was Isla, hair braided, wearing a navy hoodie too large for her shoulders. In her hands, the note he had slid under her door. "I believe you." She looked up. "Is it true?" she asked. Ezra didn't answer. He couldn't. So she stepped inside. I knew something was wrong. I always have. Ezra met her eyes. They were steady but trembling underneath, like glass right before the shatter. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Ezra said nothing for a moment. Then finally, because he didn't see a daughter. He saw an opportunity. A long silence. Then Isla sat down. Then we're both experiments, aren't we? Ezra looked at her. For the first time, truly looked. Not at her condition, not at her files, but at the girl beneath the layers of synthetic programming and forced smiles. He reached for his notebook, flipped to the center, a map, hand-drawn, precise, detailed. Their servers are centralized here, he said, encrypted, but I can work around that. If I get inside, I can download every log, every test, every unauthorized neural tap. You'll have the truth. Isla studied the page, and if we fail, Ezra didn't blink. Then at least we tried to stop pretending. That night, they met Raina in the South Wing stairwell. No cameras, no key cards, only manual locks. Raina handed Ezra a flash drive. 30-second window once you bypass the inner wall, she warned, no margin for error. Isla tucked the drive into her coat. Let's make it count. But as they turned the final corridor, the alarms began to scream. Red lights flooded the hall. A voice crackled from the speakers. Unauthorized access detected. Intrusion protocol active. Ezra's heart slammed into his ribs. They know, Isla whispered. From down the corridor, footsteps thundered. Guards, dozens. Ezra grabbed Isla's hand. Run. Ezra had never run so hard in his life. Not through the projects, not when his grandma got sick, not even when he first stepped onto the plane that had brought him here. But now, with Isla's fingers gripping his, alarms wailing behind them, and the thunder of boots growing louder by the second, ran like his future depended on it. Because it did. And so did hers. They darted past the biometric labs, down a steel ramp slick with condensation. Each red strobe light that flashed cast Isla's face in jolted frames fear, resolve, panic, determination. This way, Ezra yelled, veering left. Isla kept up, her steps uneven but unstoppable. You know where you're going. Right, she panted. Ezra didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he couldn't believe where the path ended. Core Command, the brain of Vale Thera, and its most heavily guarded secret. They reached the load-in by a vast hollow chamber beneath the main control center. Crates of equipment, unused wheelchairs, unlabeled barrels, a long-forgotten surgical bed. Ezra pulled Isla behind a pillar. Voices echoed nearby. Radios crackled. Orders barked. They're heading for the core seal off the east gate. Bradford wants the boy alive. Ezra clenched his fists. They weren't looking for justice. They were looking for containment. He scanned the ceiling until he saw it. A service ladder, welded to the wall, half rusted, bathed in shadow. That's our way in, he whispered. Isla followed his gaze and nodded. But as Ezra stepped forward, stopped right there, a guard, big, armed, already lifting his weapon. Ezra raised his hands. No sudden moves. He murmured to Isla. The guard advanced. You're not authorized down here. Drop whatever's in your pocket slowly. Ezra met Isla's eyes. She slipped the flash drive behind her back. Ezra took a step forward, then another. I'm not what you think I am, he said, voice calm. You're a thief. The guard barked. A hacker. You broke into protected archives. Ezra inhaled, then said something that changed everything. I'm not the only one. Bradford did it first. To his daughter. The guard flinched. A pause. Long, heavy, human, and in that hesitation Isla moved. She flung a crate toward the guard's feet. He stumbled. Ezra grabbed a loose wire from the shelf, snapped it into the man's belt buckle. A surge. He collapsed. They didn't wait. The climb was brutal. Ezra led, Isla behind. The flash drive clenched between her teeth as her hands gripped the rungs. The metal stung their palms. Dust choked their lungs. Above them, the hatch to core command. Below, boot steps growing louder. And then a hand reached up from below, almost catching Isla's ankle. She kicked, missed, kicked again. The hand slipped away. Ezra shoved the hatch open. A hiss. Cold air. They scrambled through and stepped into the belly of the beast. The core was quiet. Too quiet. A circular chamber, walls of curved glass, blinking monitors, humming servers encircling a central console. Ezra rushed to the interface. "This is it," he said. "I just need time." Isla slid the drive into the port. A whir, then a flash of green across the screen. "Welcome, Ezra Michael Quinn. Encryption access recognized. Download commencing." Seconds ticked by. 5%, 17%, 31%, but behind them the door burst open, and in walked Bradford Vale. Not with guards, not with weapons, alone, calm, composed, deadly. "I expected more from you, Ezra," he said, voice smooth as silk. Ezra stood protectively in front of Isla. "And I expected you to treat your daughter like a human being." He shot back. Bradford's jaw tensed. "She was born broken. I fixed her. She's not a product. She was a promise, a glimpse of the future. And you just threw it away for what your conscience, Ezra, didn't flinch. I chose truth." Isla stepped forward. Her voice was quiet. "Is that all I am to you?" she asked. Bradford turned to her, and for the first time, his mask slipped. There was something in his eyes. Not regret, not even shame, just calculation. "You're more than you were. That should be enough." Isla stared at him, and then said, simply, "It's not." Behind them, the console beeped. 100% complete. Transfer successful. Initiating distributed upload. Ezra hit enter. The files dispersed encrypted copies shot to cloud drives, external servers, even a journalist's inbox preset on a delay. Bradford rushed forward, but it was too late. The truth was already out. He stared at the screen, then at Ezra. "You have no idea what you've just done." Ezra didn't move. "Yes," he said softly, "I do." For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Ezra Michael Quinn, whistleblower, or traitor breaking Valethera's darkest secrets exposed in massive data leak, Isla Vale, the CEO's daughter, her test subject B01. The headlines flooded every screen from Times Square to a hotel lobby in Nairobi. The truth was out, but so was the backlash. In a dim airport terminal thousands of miles away. Ezra stared up at the flat-screen monitor. His photo flashed beside Isla's, beneath them the words hero or hacker. He slumped further into his seat. Isla sat beside him in a gray hoodie and oversized glasses. They looked nothing like the public imagined them, two fugitives, worn thin by nights of no sleep, on the run from a machine they had just dared to wound. Ezra's phone buzzed. A message from Raina. "They're freezing all assets. Stay off the grid. Trust no one." He turned to Isla, trying to keep his voice steady. "We'll lay low for a few days, then maybe we go to the press directly." Isla didn't answer right away. She was watching a little girl across the terminal, older than she'd been when the enhancement treatments began. The girl giggled as she chased bubbles from her juice straw. Free, innocent. Isla blinked hard and looked away. Later that night, in a motel room on the outskirts of Phoenix, Ezra sat cross-legged on the carpet, sorting through what was left of the data drive. Each file brought another punch to the gut: neural overrides, unauthorized surgeries, psychological manipulation labeled resilience testing. The worst, the voice logs from Isla's early years, recordings of her crying, begging for her father, begging for it to stop. Ezra had to pause. He couldn't listen all the way through. His hand shook. Across the room, Isla stared at the ceiling. "I used to think it was normal," she said quietly. "The tests, the pain. I thought everyone had to earn their right to walk." Ezra turned to her. "I'm so sorry." She smiled bitterly. "Don't be. I'm not broken anymore. Not because he fixed me, but because I finally see him for who he is." By morning, the world had split. Protests bloomed outside Valethera's headquarters, but so did counter-protests. Corporate spokespeople dismissed the leak as digitally altered misinformation. On a talk show, an expert sneered, "She walks now, doesn't she? If the science works, what's the problem?" Ezra wanted to scream at the screen, because the problem wasn't the walking, it was the cost of it, the deception, the stolen childhood, the consent never given. They moved again, bus to train, train to borrowed car, car to foot. By the end of the week, they reached New Mexico, a safe house owned by one of Raina's old med school friends. It had no Wi-Fi, no cameras, just silence, stars, and time to think. And think they did. One night, Ezra stood alone in the backyard, watching the desert sky. So many stars. He remembered his grandma's voice. "Stars are promises, baby. They remind us there's something out there bigger than us. So don't forget to look up." But looking up didn't feel like enough anymore. He needed to act. Back inside, Isla was scribbling in a notebook. "What are you writing?" Ezra asked. She held it up, the full story. "In my words, not theirs. A beat. I want people to know what it felt like." Ezra nodded slowly. "I'll help you finish it." They didn't expect the knock at the door. It was past midnight. Ezra's pulse spiked. Isla's hand reached instinctively for the backpack with the drive. Then it's Raina, alone. Ezra peeked through the curtain. It really was her. Hair shorter, face thinner, but those same steady eyes. He opened the door. Raina stepped in, dropped her duffel, and said 5 words Bradford's issuing a warrant. They sat in the candlelit kitchen. "Interpol, private bounty, doesn't matter. He wants you silenced." Ezra exhaled. "Figures." Raina leaned forward. "But here's the thing. You can't disappear now." Ezra frowned. "I thought that was the whole point, Hyde. Survive." "No," she said. "That was step 1. Step 2 is turning this spark into a fire." She handed Isla a flash drive. Independent outlets, unedited footage, survivor testimonials. "You need to tell the story yourself. Raw, real, unfiltered." Ezra glanced at Isla. She looked scared, but she didn't back down. Later, as they packed for another journey, Ezra stopped in the hallway mirror. For a second, he didn't recognize the reflection. Gone was the scrappy hacker with a love of wires and gears. In his place, a young man who had faced down an empire and lived to tell it. But doubt crept in again. "Am I doing the right thing?" he whispered. Behind him, Isla appeared. She didn't hesitate. "You already did." The room was dark, save for the blue LED ring on the camera. Ezra adjusted the angle, checked the mic, then looked at Isla. "You ready?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for the notebook she'd carried through 5 states, opened to the first page, and smoothed it with her palm. Then she looked up and nodded. "Let's do it." Ezra pressed record. The video was simple. No graphics, no music, no edits, just Isla, in a hoodie, in front of a faded wooden wall. She spoke clearly, slowly, from the heart. "My name is Isla Lennox. I was born in a private wing of Valethera Medical Center. My father is Bradford Valetha CEO, but I'm not here to talk about him. I'm here to talk about me, about the girl who was never allowed to be one." She paused, not to cry, but to breathe. "When I was 5, I fell trying to chase a balloon in our backyard. My father said it was because my legs were weak, that he could fix it, that I was special, that I would help other children one day. What he didn't tell me was that I was never sick, never broken. He made me a subject in an experiment, not a patient, not a daughter, a prototype." The silence after those words was heavier than thunder. Ezra edited nothing. He didn't need to. Isla's story told itself between the tremble in her voice and the fire in her eyes. She spoke for 20 minutes, of machines wired into her spine, of memory wipes masked as sedation, of waking up in restraints and being told she was dreaming. "I learned to walk, but I forgot how to trust." When the upload was complete, Ezra sat back. The title was simple: "I was my father's science project." They didn't expect millions of views overnight, but that's exactly what happened. First came the silence. Then the storm. Teen whistleblower reveals biotech horrors. Daughter accuses billionaire father of human experimentation. Isla Lennox tells the world, "I was never sick." Then came the reactions. A nurse from Valethera's surgical division left a voice message anonymously. "I quit that day. When I realized what they were doing, I didn't have the guts to speak. She does. She's braver than we ever were." A mother from Chicago emailed my son was almost enrolled in that same cognitive trial. "I backed out last minute. I thank God every day." But not all reactions were supportive. One pundit on a major news channel scoffed, "Another ungrateful rich kid throwing her own father under the bus." Why now? What's she really after Ezra wanted to punch the screen? But Isla didn't. She just watched, stone-faced, and whispered, "Let them talk." I already told the truth. They kept moving, but the internet followed. Their video was translated into 17 languages. It hit 100 million views in 48 hours. Congress scheduled an emergency hearing, and Valethera. They went on the offensive. Bradford released a statement. "My daughter's confused. These claims are exaggerated. We remain committed to ethical medical research." He even posted a photo of Isla as a child hooked to wires, smiling under a banner that read, "Our future, our fight." Ezra slammed the laptop shut. Isla just whispered, "He always said the banner was for hope. Now I know it was for control." They were offered interviews, CNN, BBC, even a live stream podcast with over 10 million followers. But Ezra said no. He had a different idea. They rented a small auditorium in Albuquerque. Folding chairs, a few lights, one mic, and they opened the doors to survivors, to whistleblowers, to families of kids who never got to speak. Raina flew in. So did a former tech from Valethera's discarded labs, a boy with tremors caused by failed implants, a mother who lost her daughter during a routine trial. They sat on stage, side by side, and one by one, they spoke, not polished, not perfect, but real. Isla stood last. She scanned the faces, some with tears, some nodding. I used to think walking made me powerful, that I was fixed. But power doesn't come from standing tall. It comes from standing for something. And I'm standing here for every child who was told their pain was progress, who were used and discarded, who were rewritten without consent. We are not failed prototypes. We are not broken. We are human. Applause didn't erupt. It grew, quiet, rising, roaring. Ezra felt something shift in the room and in the world. As they stepped off the stage, Raina hugged Isla tight. "You changed the story," she whispered. "You took the pen away from the people who tried to write over you." Isla blinked back tears, then looked at Ezra and smiled. "We're not done. Are we?" Ezra shook his head. Not even close. 2 weeks after the broadcast, the headlines changed. Senate subpoenas, Valthera executives, Bradford Vale indicted for ethics violations, protests spread to biotech headquarters worldwide. The world was finally listening, but the empire wasn't falling quietly. Ezra was sitting on the motel bed, laptop open, when the footage surfaced. Surveillance footage from a week ago. It showed him and Isla at the safe house. Smeared headlines followed fugitives or freedom fighters. Ezra Quinn linked to international cyber crimes. They knew then Bradford was fighting back. Not with truth, but with smear. Isla stared at the footage in silence. It didn't surprise her, but it still hurt. "He's trying to flip the story," she said softly. Ezra looked up, and she met his eyes. He won't win, but winning wouldn't be easy. Public sentiment was split. She's lying for attention. He hacked the company for money. Why wait this long if it was so bad Raina was already fielding legal threats? So was the New Mexico auditorium that hosted the survivor panel. Even the mother of the child who died got a cease and desist. Ezra paced the room. "He's trying to outlast us," he muttered. Isla sat still, then said, "Then we don't play the waiting game." They made a choice that night, not just to resist, but to confront. They would go back to the beginning, to Valthera's main campus in Colorado Springs, to face Bradford Vale in public. Raina tried to talk them out of it. "He's a billionaire with legal shields thicker than steel," she warned. "You'll never get within 10 feet of him." But Ezra was calm. "We're not sneaking in." He pulled out 2 folded subpoenas, signed by a federal judge, backed by the Whistleblower Protection Agency. "We've been summoned to testify." The flight to Denver was quiet. Turbulence shook the cabin, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside Ezra's chest. Isla watched the clouds with distant eyes. Finally, she spoke. "You know what scares me most." Ezra turned to her. "It's not that he might deny everything, or that the media might twist our words. It's that a part of me still wants him to be proud of me." Ezra didn't answer right away. Then he whispered, "That's not weakness, Isla. That's humanity." The hearing chamber was cold, a wall of cameras, rows of senators, 1,000 lenses trained on their every twitch. Bradford sat across from them, impeccably dressed, emotionless, like a statue carved from ambition. Ezra went first. He detailed the data leaks, the backdoor files, the hidden logs. He answered questions, calmly, precisely. Every time a senator interrupted, He waited, then answered with twice the clarity. Isla watched him and realized he wasn't scared anymore. He believed in what he was doing. Then it was her turn. She took a deep breath, walked to the podium, and paused. The silence thickened. Then, "My name is Isla Lennox Vale. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a politician. I'm not a lawyer. I am someone who was born into a lie and chose to tell the truth." She told them everything, again, but this time not to a screen, to faces. Faces that flinched when she spoke of surgeries before memories, of waking up with scars she didn't consent to, of learning to walk but losing trust in the process. When she finished, a long pause followed. Then Miss Vale, a senator, asked, "Do you believe your father ever loved you?" Isla looked at Bradford. He didn't blink, didn't move. Then she said, "I think he loved the version of me he invented, but he never met the real one until today." Bradford finally took the stand. His voice was smooth, practiced. "My daughter was born with a rare muscular condition. We acted with urgency and care. These claims are rooted in emotional trauma, not objective facts." Ezra clenched his fists under the table. Then a senator asked, "Mr. Vale, did you ever alter your daughter's memories without consent?" A pause. "I have no personal recollection of such procedures being conducted," Ezra muttered. How convenient. But Isla didn't flinch. She stared straight ahead and whispered, "He's unraveling." After the session, journalists swarmed. Questions flew like arrows. "Do you regret going public? What's next for Valethera, Ela? How do you feel after confronting your father?" She paused at that one, then answered, softly, "I feel free." Ezra stood beside her. Raina joined moments later. The three of them on pieces of a broken machine, now something new, something whole. That night, they watched the headlines again. But for the first time, they didn't feel afraid, because the world wasn't asking if they were lying. The world was asking, how could this happen, and how do we stop it from happening again? 6 months later, the sky over Cedar Bridge County was streaked with gold. A small community center converted from an old aircraft hangar buzzed with quiet voices and fresh hope. On the door hung a wooden sign, hand-carved, the visible ones, a place for those who were unseen. Inside, Isla finished helping a girl with a mobility brace adjust her balance. She didn't correct her posture. She just listened, then smiled. "You don't have to walk the way they tell you. You walk your way. That's enough." Across the hall, Ezra tinkered with a donated server rack. He'd been offered a dozen tech jobs after the hearing, even a book deal. He turned them all down. This was where he belonged, building safe systems for real people, not selling dreams to companies that never listened. Outside, news vans still parked occasionally. They wanted updates, scandals, retractions, quotes, but Isla never gave sound bites, only stories. The government inquiry had finished in February. Bradford Vale was officially stripped of his board seats. Federal charges were pending. Valethera's valuation plummeted by 68%. They rebranded as Nuva Gen. But the world remembered the truth. Raina now ran a nonprofit legal group, helping whistleblowers safely come forward. She visited every week, sometimes to advise, sometimes just to sit. Healing, she once told Isla, isn't a headline, it's a process. One morning, a mother brought her Sona nonverbal 9-year-old with implanted spinal supports. He had never smiled, but when he met Isla's therapy dog, Ollie, he giggled. The first sound his mother had heard in 2 years. She cried into Isla's arms and whispered, "You gave him something no one else could, a reason to feel." Isla didn't say anything. She just held her tighter. Late one night, as spring folded into summer, Isla sat alone on the roof, watching stars. Ezra joined her with 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one. She sipped quietly, then asked, "Do you think he ever loved me?" Ezra didn't rush to answer. "Finally, I think. He loved the idea of you more than the reality, but you learned to love the parts of yourself he tried to hide. That's more powerful." Isla turned to him. "I'm scared that some part of me still wants his approval." Ezra smiled softly. "That's not weakness. That's a scar. And scars mean we lived through something." She nodded, then leaned her head on his shoulder. A few weeks later, they held a gathering. No stage, no cameras, no speeches, just circle after circle of people with stories. One woman had been sterilized as a teen without consent. One boy had grown up thinking he was sick until he realized it was fear, not illness. That had crippled him. Each spoke. Each was heard. No one interrupted. No one doubted. That was the miracle. Afterward, a young girl came up to Isla. She wore a leg brace, but more than that, she wore hope. "I want to be like you one day," she said shyly, "not because you can walk, but because you make people feel seen." Isla knelt, took the girl's hand, and whispered, "You already are like me. You're writing your story, and that's what makes you powerful." That night, Ezra found a printed note on his desk, Isla's handwriting. "You helped me find my voice, so I built a place where others can find theirs." Underneath a small ink-stamped logo, a figure rising from a shadow, the visible ones. He folded the note, kept it in his coat pocket from that day on. The story never became a movie. There were no parades, no flashy medals, just lives rebuilt, one truth at a time. And that, they knew, was enough. She didn't just learn to walk again. She'd learned to stand against power, against silence, against everything meant to keep her small. He wasn't just a hacker from nowhere. He was a mirror, reflecting what this world tries to erase, the brilliance that comes from those it never sees. Together, Ezra and Isla didn't just survive. They rewrote the rules. For every child who was silenced, for every woman told her body wasn't hers, for every voice dismissed for not sounding like wealth or whiteness or authority. The story was for them. But what about us? Because the truth is, discrimination doesn't always scream. Sometimes it wears a lab coat, or a smile, or a polished job title. Sometimes it calls itself care. So we ask you, how many Islas are still out there drugged into obedience? How many Ezras are still out there coding in the dark, never invited in? And more importantly, will you see them? Will you stand with them? If this story moved you, hold it in your heart. But don't stop there. Like this video to show you believe in truth, share it to open someone else's eyes. Subscribe for more real, raw stories that don't just entertain, but awaken. Because the next story might not be about Isla, it might be about you, or someone you love, or someone you've never noticed until now. Drop a comment below. What part of this story stayed with you? What truth did you see? Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay awake, stay kind, stay standing.